morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Coleman, and I'm a principal here at Efficio, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. We're really lucky today to be talking to IPC, and we have Bryan Griffiths, their CEO, and Simon Aldred, their COO, with us today to talk about how they're building a high-performance team through collaboration and culture. Now, before we get started, I would just like to explain how you can participate in today's event. You have the opportunity to submit text questions by clicking the Q&A button on the control panel at the bottom of the page. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We will be running through and having some discussions between us, so please, feel free to ask any questions that you want to. So Bryan, Simon, welcome. And to start with, Bryan, can I ask you to tell us a bit about IPC and who they are, what their focus is?
Yep, here we are. Yeah, so Sarah, thanks for the invite. Morning, everybody. Thanks, and big thank you for joining as well. And hopefully what we're going to take you through will be kind of interesting, and there'll be something that you can take away for your own business. So yeah, IPC is an interesting kind of business model, so it's worth spending a few minutes just to explain what we're about. We were formed 20 years ago. IPC is an organization which is owned by Subway franchisees across Europe. There are other IPCs around the world, and it's a business model that Subway has used for over 25 years. So essentially the purchasing and supply chain activity for Subway franchisees is run by a cooperative, a buying organization that they also own. So that's the other peculiar thing about our business, is that we are owned by Subway franchisees, and they are our sold customer as well. So they buy off our services. So quite a broad stakeholder group. We support over 6,000 stores, Subway stores around our region. Recently, we expanded from Europe to cover the Middle East and Africa. So really, if we think about who our owners are and who our customers are, we've got about 3,000 of those, even though we serve just one brand. And if you look from a Subway perspective, we look like a traditional purchasing and supply chain business, but we're independent, so we have to run our own kind of functions, whether that's HR, finance, IT, legal. So we operate independently, but we function within this kind of broader ecosystem of the Subway franchise network. Hopefully that gives a feel for the nature of our business.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. So, what sort of size is the number of markets that you operate in? Do you have to work across different languages, or?
Yeah, so multiple languages. We probably cover at the core about 8 languages across the business, and we've evolved over time to build our geography and the number of markets that we serve over time. In the very, very early days, to a large extent, we were set up to help Subway open up markets.
Oh, okay.
So when I joined, many years ago, we might have had 7 or 8 core markets. So we now support Subway franchisees in over 50 markets.
Wow.
And they vary in scale from 2,500 stores in the UK and Ireland to 1 or 2 in some other markets. But we make sure that we are appropriately serving those markets and supporting them with our supply chain. And I say over 6,000 restaurants in total. But that's been exponential. So okay. When I joined, there was when the business was formed, there were 50 stores in the whole of Europe. So as you can imagine, opening building the supply chain that allowed the brand to grow to over 6,000 stores was interesting. And really, on our business and the journey that we've been on, we started as a very, very small business. So, you know, me and one other person to a
Wow.
kind of a medium-sized business now, covering
That's
those
a
kind of markets in
fantastic
that scale.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic
really,
journey, and
really
lots of
interesting.
complexity in there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and complexity that we've been dealing with through our transformation, and complexity that to some extent, you know, we had to transform in order to do a better job of managing that complexity, particularly around stakeholders. So yeah, that's been a kind of a driver as much as something that we've had to respond to as well.
So that leads me on to kind of what factors were key in your decision to decide to transform the organisation?
So a number of things all coming together at the same
Yep.
time, a real kind of sweet spot. Firstly, Subway have been going through a transformation over the last 3 or 4 years, and the Subway business was going through a dramatic transformation, really looking at every single moving part of the business. And we'd evolved over time. So we as a supply chain business, we moved into other areas that were not necessarily traditional purchasing and supply chain activities. So, for example, 12 years ago, we set up and ran a loyalty scheme, which is obviously something you wouldn't traditionally find a purchasing and supply chain
Yeah.
business doing. But we also got into other areas of the business that were kind of sat between, you know, areas that traditionally a franchisor wouldn't get involved in, but we could add value. So we run a technology help desk, for example, for franchisees. So the Subway transformation really allowed us, as you know, in conjunction with Subway, to say, okay, what are the things that we should be involved in? Where should we be focusing our attention? And they had a desire, as we did, to say we want to make sure that our supply chain operations really are best in class, wherever possible, world class. So we worked with Hackett, who did a benchmarking exercise and really identified the areas that we need to focus on to kind of bridge the gap between where we were and what we needed to achieve to be world class. So the Subway business was also changing dramatically. Lots of new stakeholders in the business. Bits of our activity that they would take, and other areas where they really asked us to double down. The other key thing in that growth story that I kind of mentioned was our teams had gone from, let's say, very, very small teams and exponential growth from kind of 50 stores to over 6,000. There were a lot of processes and systems that were either lacking or very individualistic. So we ended up in a situation a number of years ago where it was, you know, the processes were based on the individual in role, and all individuals were doing the heavy lifting, particularly around kind of data management and processes. So we delivered a lot in a very entrepreneurial environment. And as you can imagine, working for Subway franchisees, and in the very early days, there was only 2 or 3 of us trying to get this whole business going. We had to be entrepreneurial. And that journey really didn't give us an opportunity to catch our breath. And therefore, we had to just kind of crack on and get stores open and help build the brand. And we never really spent the time focusing on, you know, are these processes right? Have we got our structure right that takes the pressure off people? So we ended up with kind of lack of process and organizational structure that I think required put a lot of pressure on the individuals to deliver, and you know, and everybody did. So this was not a business that was broken, but it just wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't sustainable in a transformed kind of broader Subway system. And one of the things that, you know, people in the business were saying is, you know, we haven't got any systems, we haven't got any processes, we need to fix it. Over the years, most of our investment in technology had been on franchisee-facing systems and programs rather than systems that helped us kind of run our supply chains efficiently and effectively. And then I guess the final piece was we came out of COVID. We're really proud of our performance through kind of COVID and post-COVID. So a lot of shocks to our supply chain, our supply chains and the team performed really, really well. We're kind of proud of the fact that we never ran out of any major lines. We never had to close any stores, unlike our competitors. But there were some things that we could absolutely learn in terms of making things kind of better, more efficient, more effective. And we'd also had over that time, over a 2 or 3 year period, about 20% of the team that we continued to build over that time, but about 20% of the team were new and had never met each other in person or very rarely. And therefore we had this whole kind of cultural challenge of how do we kind of take a really good look at our culture and build that into our transformation at the same time. So that, for me, that was an opportunity not to be missed. At the same time, it was critical because we'd had a pretty strong culture. It wasn't broken, but we had a bunch of people who were new to the business that we needed to really properly integrate. So there's as I've described, there's a lot going on there, and therefore it took a pretty structured approach to say, okay, how are we going to pick our way through it in a way that we knew what we had to deliver, which was a kind of a transformation which set us up for the next wave of the business, if you like.
That makes a lot of sense. And I assume you were kind of trying to keep the best of what you had whilst also moving the organization on to world class. We did not want to throw out the things that made us successful, special, the relationships that we have. I think one of the key things that we built the business on is really, really strong stakeholder management. It's in franchise systems, the stakeholder relationships can be more complex than in a traditional business. And so we worked out that we knew how to get things done within our area of expertise within a complex stakeholder environment, and we didn't want to lose that. We wanted to take all of the good bits of our culture. We wanted to address some of the weak spots, and then in particular we really needed to focus on how do we organize ourselves, get our processes and our systems right, to get the business in kind of really good shape for the next phase. Because I don't think it is too dramatic to say that one of the messages we were getting from the team was we love it here, we love the business that we work for, the fact that we work for franchisees, they're our customer, they're our owner, but this is not sustainable, and we just can't keep working like that. That was loud and clear, the message that was coming from the team. So how did you go about making changes?
Sorry, do you want to?
Let me pick this up. I'll just add one extra thing to what you've said, Brian. It's all spot on. I think we also had a board, a very passionate board that are elected franchisees, and they take part of their responsibility is to take a longer term view on the business and more strategic view. And as part of that as well, they were giving us the feedback about the world is changing around us. We have delivered some great stuff over the last 20 years, but let's make sure that we're agile enough to be able to continue to deliver, because the pace of change is not reducing, is it?
Yeah, I think the comments are, wasn't it? We have to be the best business that we can be.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then about making the changes. So as you would normally do with a large change program, it was about resourcing it right and having a clear direction. So part of that was bringing on board Efficio. We've worked in the past a little bit with Efficio, various members of the team, and we've all had a great experience. So taking the output from Hackett, which was a really well constructed analysis of our opportunity. We worked closely with Efficio in those early stages, kind of sketched out what the scale and scope of the change was, from org design, process development, investment in systems. And Brian talked a little bit about process, and if we're really honest, as a leadership group, we are slightly allergic, or historically have been allergic to processes. So that's a change that we needed to go through really quickly, is recognise that process enables excellence and doesn't get in the way, as long as you kind of set that up right. So as part of those work streams, it really was about putting process and systems planning and KPIs right at the centre of the change that we needed to do. So alongside bringing on you guys from Efficio, It was also about the broader feedback as well. So we went out to the franchise community, got feedback about what's working well, what do they want to see do differently. We went and spoke with colleagues in the subway system, got a feel for how things are working there, where was their ambition. And what was great on the feedback, certainly from the subway side, is they wanted to see us as really close integrated business partners. So when you kind of get that message, it really helps you, set your stall out appropriately. And then we figured out, what do we need to do internally to make this a success? So we set up a separate transformation team. So we had one of the leadership teams at Abbey took over as a transformation sponsor. And we brought on Mike Trest as project manager from day one. And those guys worked sort of daily stand-ups with the team from Efficio. And that really stood us in good stead. And we evolved that methodology as we went through, as we got more confident, as we got focused in the right areas and went from kind of that discovery to design to develop and then finally into delivery. We brought more and different people along from the wider business as well. So that's kind of the general approach that we took, which I think is a fairly standard sort of methodology. But for us, it was quite different. Really putting a dedicated project manager on and a highly focused transformation lead as well. That was new for us, and to be honest, it's disciplines that we've taken forward into the continuous improvement that we've got going on as well.
Thank you. I wonder if you could talk a bit more about some of the main things that you decided to change.
Yeah, Bryan, do you want to go with this, and I'll.
Yeah. I think the key things one of the key things we made a point of really early on was this was not an exercise of headcount reduction, and Simon's touched on the board there. And so again, just go back to what I said at the beginning, these are franchisees that we report to. They own the business and they are the customer of the business, and they made it really clear which we want you to be the best business that you can be. We're going to rely on the expertise. We've grown this business successfully and we want to kind of transform it. So we did not enter this exercise as we've just got to take heads out. It was about right people in the right roles, right organizational structure. And as we keep banging on about kind of processes and systems, and then creating the right environment. So what we've always recognized since day one is the only thing that we've got in this business is, if you like, kind of people and data. And they're the two things that that's where we add value when we bring those two things together. And if you take our history had been almost in the very early days, every 6 months we were having to reorganize as we brought, the 10th person on, and the 11th person on, the 12th person on. And this was the first time that just a reorganization of people was not going to work for us. And that was the light bulb moment for me with the Efficio kind of guys, was you just can't do the org change without the process and the systems piece. So to some extent, why did we decide on that change? It was obvious that we would have failed if we hadn't. And we relied heavily on the expertise of you guys and other people who joined the business at the same time. But we did focus on the org design, because that was part of it, but it couldn't have just operated in isolation. And that org design was really focused on how we're going to become more efficient. We moved the purchasing and the supply chain people. We went from being kind of category led to being process led. So we moved from a traditional category structure to strategic sourcing, supply chain operations, kind of the day-to-day supply chain, and then something we call commercialization, where we are taking ideas that the brand has and concepts and bringing those to life within the business. So that worked really well. And then, as Simon said, we learned kind of a lot of the key disciplines that the change process, if you like, had taken us through, and we'd really shone a light on where we were lacking. So we put new roles in, be that risk management. We put a PMO office in place, project managers as part of our routine, a centre of excellence as well. So the whole look and feel of the business was starting to change, and the discipline with which we kind of ran the business. And I think we started to address I kind of refer to them as kind of legacy or individualistic processes that we had. So don't want anyone to go away with the sense that we had no processes at all. We absolutely did, but they built up over time. And I say they were nuanced around particular people in particular markets, bearing in mind that we have kind of people dotted around the region. And that we needed to address, those kind of processes and what we had in place. And that was probably one of the, I'm sure we'll come on to the, what worked well, what was challenging. I think that process piece was pretty challenging. The stakeholder piece as well, that we, why did we change? We knew we had to serve a business that was transforming in a very different way. We had to start to do a much better job at capacity planning. We had to say no a lot more. We built the business really on saying yes, arguably too many times. Part of the frustration with the team was they were saying, can you please stop saying yes? And they were saying that to me, not just to the broader leadership team. I was the one who was guilty of that. And because we'd kind of consistently delivered, we needed to manage this transformation whilst still delivering on our kind of business as usual. And bearing in mind, we were right in the thick of our transformation, post-COVID, post-Ukraine, with all of the supply chain shocks, the inflation that we were dealing with, and we didn't have a choice but to still be focusing and delivering on that day-to-day mission, as well as going through our transformation. And we chose to do that. And you could have said, look, this is not the time to be doing it with all of those things that are hitting you. Interestingly, the transformation and some of the pilots that we put in place, it actually allowed us to deliver on some of those things. And that was one of the great successes of the transformation, was it actually allowed us to deal with some of the day-to-day priorities that we had. We were in even better shape to deliver on those. And that was in part because of the way that we went about the transformation. We started to pilot some teams. So
it became an enabler rather than getting in the way of getting the business as usual stuff done. So actually, the fact that you did them alongside each other was a great help.
Yeah. I mean, we had three big external things, if you like, that were arguably a big distraction for the transformation, but actually they became a focal point for the transformation, which was all of the supply chain issues, let's say post-COVID and Ukraine, with availability of product and shipping challenges and the like. And then we also had the inflationary pressures that we had to deal with, and our customer, the franchisees, were dealing with their own inflationary pressures, whether that's energy, labor, as well as the bit that we manage. And so they were really reliant on us helping them on that front, because they had their own issues, as well as rebuilding their businesses coming out of COVID. And then the third was the brand. We managed probably the biggest product relaunch of something called Subway Series in our history, and we ended up managing that with relative ease in comparison to how we'd managed things in the past. So it kind of allowed us to prove the concepts that we were putting in place. It was a rare opportunity to say, let's see if this really works. And it
really helped us with the confidence.
It really worked.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. Bryan, can I just drill down more into the going from category led to process led? I think what we were previously asking kind of our core sourcing and procurement teams to do was think 2-3 years ahead about what's their strategic approach to managing a category, asking them to run sourcing events to drive costs down, create value, manage risk, to make sure that we had good contingency plans in place, to chase and place orders through, particularly, times of pressure when COVID hit, or we had global supply chain issues, and then do all the innovation working alongside culinary colleagues and on the Subway side to bring new product to market quicker than ever before. So we were asking the impossible almost. And we were lucky that we've historically relied on hiring great people and retaining them so that they can know how to navigate. But I think that was, this was the test of enough is enough. So what we have now systematically done with your kind of counsel on this is separate out the key things. So our strat sourcing group now focus on longer range, strategic sourcing events and managing the category more strategically. And we've stood up a new team in that supply chain group, which is really focused on supplier performance and distributor performance capability. And I think we've got the balance right there. The art in all this is making sure that when you have multiple people focused on a process, that you don't create accidental silos. So that's taken some time to work through. The team are empowered to focus on it, and it gets better kind of month on month, I would say. And I think we're in really great shape now.
Yeah, that's great, and it is a journey, isn't it? I wanted to just come back to the people piece, because the picture that you both painted is you've got some great people and they've been working really hard to keep everything running well. How did you make sure that all the teams were really part of building the future vision? How did you look after them whilst doing something that can seem quite brutal to teams, which is restructuring what their jobs look like and the way they need to work?
Yeah, so I'll pick that up if that's okay. It was all about engagement, and we'll get it out on the table straight away. I think in our ambition to do absolutely the right thing, which is kind of what drives IPC, particularly around big people decisions, we probably took too long in bringing kind of the high-level org changes to the board of business. But once we did, they were excited about the change. Obviously, everybody has to go through their own change process. But the way that we worked, collectively across the organisation is we started with the business strategy. We took ourselves off site for 3 or 4 days, if you remember, Sarah, and that got us in a great shape. Yep. We had something that we could all, like a beacon that we could all focus on. And it allowed us then all of the subsequent planning strategies, KPIs that we were developing do they serve the business strategy that we're putting in place? We also had a new vision, so we kept the mission the same. We, from day one, it's all about serving the franchisee, making them profitable and competitive now, and in the future, that doesn't change. It's not going to change, but our vision did, and we spent some time working through the vision. And I remember a session with you and Rich just got it down to really, what are we trying to achieve over the next 3 years? And the vision is that we become a best-in-class business by the end of the end of this year, which is coming up closely, and I'm feeling really good about it. But having a very clear vision that is measurable, linked to a clear, concise business strategy that people can buy into, I think set the stall out well. Yes. And then after that, the teams are kind of empowered. So we had every single team, so we've got 16, 18 teams across the business. Everybody now has their own annual plan, a 3-year strategy, Apex KPIs that we measure on a monthly basis and broadcast out to the wider business. And we're going through kind of that process re-engineering activity as well, and that continues to get better and better. And I would say that at the start of the process, we were probably nervous, anxious about our ability to do process, about our ability to do strategy and planning. It's a learned skill. And I think by having the right people around the table and giving the confidence to the wider business and empowering the senior team to go off and work with their teams to build it out, that's been for me, an unintended but amazing consequence, that we are really getting good at planning and execution. We've always been good at the execution, it's the planning side that we've really stepped up on as well. And then a massive part is around understanding our culture and the change management that goes with that. So we'll focus on really strong communication, engagement, stand-ups, lots of newsletters going out, and really trying to take on board where everybody is in that journey and supporting them through that process. And then once we've got everybody on board, that's when the really hard work started for the team, because they had, as Bryan said, the day job to deliver, as well as going through this transformation. And fortunately, we got a really broad team of very passionate people that rolled their sleeves up, really got on with it, and I think we're increasingly in great shape.
That's great, thank you. And then the piece that often suffers when you do these kind of things is the culture, because you go through this kind of dip while you're going through changing things where people are a bit nervous or worried about how things may develop. How did you manage that? You know, what did you see as being the role of the organization's culture in the process?
Sorry, I'll let
Yes.
me
Yeah.
take that question. So our culture, I think, historically has always been had been strong. It built up over time. You know, we didn't.
Yep.
The organisation wasn't kind of created with 30 people, you know, landing in office and off we went from there. We kind of grown up over quite a period of time. I think what we recognised early on was exactly what you said there, Sarah, which was that it can be such a critical part of success, is that we took the conscious decision was, no, we are going to have a work stream here. We're going to have a pillar within our transformation, which is looking at our culture and working out what do we need to do to strengthen it. Is probably the best way of describing it. So it also came at a time when Subway were looking at their culture, and they were working with Heidrick and Struggles, previously Sendelani. So we, as Simon said, as an integrated part of their business, we were involved in that process. So we replicated that in our business, but we did another piece of work alongside that, which is really look at our values. And we did 2 or 3 things there, which again, I think, well, has worked well. It is still work in progress and is working well. So we did a kind of classic piece of work across the whole team. Tell us what you like, tell us what your values are that are important to you in your personal life. You know, what do you like about the business? And then, you know, what do you want to see this business to be about? And then as a leadership team, we just had a very light touch from them. We worked with an organization called NDC, and we went out to the business and we recruited, if that's the right phrase, but we got a group of culture champions who took that work on, and then worked across the business to identify and kind of redefine and relaunch what our values were about. And they have quickly become part of our transformation. Bearing in mind that, you know, we kind of drew a line, which was important, but, you know, we continue with a lot of the work that we set off, you know, 2 years ago, that we're continuing with that. And the culture piece is really, really important. So I think, again, I think I've said, you know, the culture wasn't broken, but there was definitely things that we could do, and it's really helped us reinforce the work that we are doing around kind of process and discipline and structure and data and the like.
So I'm conscious we've got about 10, 15 minutes, I think 10 minutes left. And I want to leave
just a couple of extra words on culture, just for the people on the call. That we've spent as much time on culture as any part of the transformation, if not more. So that's how important it is to our business. And my advice to anybody that is going through a similar transformation, if your top leader in the transformation, so in our case it was Bryan, is not fully invested and embedded in the cultural strategy, then you're not destined to become a world-class or a best-in-class business.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, I totally would support that. So I just wanted to ask whether we could quickly talk about any challenges or any of the elements that you think are most successful in the next few minutes before we move to questions.
The challenges were, I think, with any typical transformation, is getting that balance between we got to create a load of new work to do the transformation and the thinking, the activity, the process development, as well as we've got stuff to deliver for our customers, the franchisees, who quite rightly are demanding, and they've got a job to do in satisfying the guests. So I think that is probably a typical challenge. I think we have learned from it, and our ongoing continuous improvement and strategy particularly around enterprise systems, is making sure that we are gearing up the resource from day one to really support the broader business with that as well. Process development, I think we're on version 3 of how we go about managing and sort of documenting and engineering our processes. I'm feeling really good about where we've got to. I'm feeling pretty good about the fact that the team listened, the broader business put their hands up and said, this doesn't work for us, let's have another go. And our Centre of Excellence have just got their arms around it, grabbed it, and I'm trying to make this as easy as possible for the broader business. And just to give context, we've got 200 KPIs, 20 strategies, and over 200 processes that we're in the process of kind of embedding, documenting, and running as well. And the scale and speed of recruitment, the challenge there is a competitive landscape at that moment in time. Supply chain is the place to be at the minute, isn't it? So going out and competing to make sure that we recruited great people takes time, doesn't it? And you need those people in to free up the burden on the board as well. So I'd say they're fairly typical challenges. And then the broader one for us as well, because we were taking over a completely new region in the Middle East, was learning about a new region, new culture, new customers, a different sort of customers because they're master franchisees. And it sounds like a small thing, but a broader time zone. But making sure you schedule meetings with colleagues in the Middle East that aren't in the middle of the night for them, but work for us in Europe. So lots of challenges and learnings.
Great. No, that's good. I'm still conscious of time, but I don't want to. I would like to just, a couple of the key things changes that you found most successful, because I think people would be really interested in that. And then maybe, we've got one or two questions we can cover.
Can we go with that, Bryan, first? And I'll...
Yeah, I think the piloting of some of our organisational changes, the fact that we navigated our way through finding a way of making sure that worked for us really helped us get things right. I think it allowed for engagement from the people involved in the business to say, what, this does work, and it allowed us to address the business challenges that we faced at the time. Simon, what do you want to?
I think we had a recent annual business review of our franchisees, and we hit the number. We shared that we'd hit the numbers on the biggest level of cost saving ever achieved in a single year. Product availability was the best it's ever been, and really hitting towards best in class if we're not already there. You talked about launching the new range of products as efficiently and effectively as we've ever done before, and with less stress within the system as well, and then reducing quality complaints as well. So, as Rich said to us on that ABI, I'd be proud to deliver one of those four in a challenging time, but to hit all four and have the team
fantastic
across the business. It's not just one team that is all of our teams enabling that to happen.
Getting them all to work together to do that is a massive task.
That's where it's all coming together. They're our apex KPIs, and we're nailing it. So that for me is a real success. And I think we've set ourselves up to be able to respond better to future external change as well. Our agility to be able to respond, our ability to work through change management just gets better and better all the time.
Well done, guys. That's great. That's a really great story. I've got a few questions that people have asked in the chat. So I just wanted to jump to those now, because I think we've got about 5 minutes left. But the first one I'd like to ask is, which benefits do you think will have the greatest value to your business in the long term?
So I think that we can still be a people-centric business, and we are setting our stall out to say, we are about people, and without the people and the team and the passion that the team have got, then we kind of haven't got a business. But we have organized ourselves, and we're going to get the processes and the systems of the data that we've got those people working on the right things. We've got the ability to say, let's look at the data. We shouldn't be working on this, or the answers different to the one that instinctively we might have said. And so I think we will, as Simon said there, we can be ready to cope with more change and to respond to what inevitably are going to be changing demands of our customer coming down the line. And we can be spending our time on delivering for the customer, fixing problems, delivering on our KPIs, delivering our mission or our vision, rather than us thinking this is just not sustainable. So I think all of that bunched together is about making us more kind of sustainable growth, which is which has got to be good for, is good news for our customers and our owners, who are the franchisees.
Yep. So thank you. That's great. I've got another question here, but please, if there are any others that you want to ask, you still probably have time to put another one into the Q&A section. From the list we've got at the moment, I'd like to say, how did you create the capacity with the teams to really make the changes happen? Because you've talked so much about how much you had going on and bringing in the additional work to kind of drive that forward. How did you reorganize things? How did you motivate the teams to manage this additional workload?
Yeah,
it's difficult, but Simon, do you want to?
Yeah, and I think I kind of said earlier on, I think we could have done, in retrospect, we could have done even more, and that's one of our learnings that we're taking into future transformations, particularly around the investment we make in enterprise systems across the business. But it was about bringing in the right capability externally, which we did. And let's be honest, where our needs were changing, we'd have very good, frank conversations, Sarah, about how we might need different people from your organisation in to support us. Stood up a dedicated PM and transformation group, and then we had about 10 or 12 individuals that owned work streams. So my responsibility at the time was to manage processes and strategies. We had other people, like Sarah was looking after culture, Serena in the business would look after HR work streams. But we had 13, 14 work streams, very well governed. In terms of the capacity in the broader business, when we did the kind of here's the framework, let's work through what this means, that was where times got tougher for the team members. Because almost bringing in the additional capacity takes time to train that capacity up. It's almost like, let me just get it done myself and move on. So there was an element of that, and the capacity from Frank, where we needed it, came through just the great will in the business and the teams going, we want this to be a success. We're bought into the vision. We're going to make this happen. That's
great. So really engaging them, it links back to that culture piece, doesn't it? Really made such a difference. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but thank you so much for sharing your story and the amazing success that you've had and the whole business has had in terms of delivering this transformation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the invite. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone.